The night smelled of whiskey, cigar smoke, and bad luck. The poker table in the back of the adobe saloon burned with lamplight, shadows stretching across dust-plastered walls. Cards slapped like pistol shots. A man coughed blood in the corner. Another slept face down on the bar, mouth open to flies. Dustin Hartman, 36, widowed 3 winters, sat at that table with an empty heart and a dangerous kind of calm. He had lost cattle, lost coin, and still kept playing because men with nothing left sometimes leaned toward madness. His eyes, gray as spent ashes, barely flicked when the dealer tossed him the last hand. The rancher across from him smirked, a greasy man with silver rings and the kind of smile that always cut someone. "Let's make it interesting," he rasped, laying down not coin but a folded slip, greasy and inked. Dustin's jaw tightened. "What's that?" "3 girls," the man said, teeth flashing like a coyote. "Mexican strays. Won 'em from another fella last week. Couldn't keep 'em. You win, they're yours. You lose, you walk home with nothing." A hush fell over the saloon. Even the drunk at the bar lifted his head. Dustin's pulse beat once heavy. He thought of his dead wife, of the silence in his ranch house, of the ache he carried every dawn. He thought of the kind of man who gambled women like cattle. His voice came low, flat. "Deal." The last card fell. Dustin laid his hand quiet. A full house. The rancher's grin collapsed. He spat and slammed the table, but the room was already leaning Dustin's way. And then, 3 young women were brought in from the back. Shackled, weary, faces dirt-smeared but eyes alive with fear and defiance. One, 21, with black braids hanging heavy over her shoulders, looked like she hadn't eaten in days but still held her chin high. Another, 24, tall, with storm in her dark eyes. And the eldest, 25, carried herself with a quiet dignity that no man had managed to break. Dustin stood slowly. His chair scraped the floor like thunder. He walked to them, his boots hollow on the wood, and took the chain in his hands. He didn't say a word. He just broke the lock with a hammer from the bar, and when the iron fell to the floor, the sound was a kind of judgment. The rancher cursed. Someone laughed nervously. Dustin only said, "They leave with me." And they did. Out into the desert night, stars burning cold above, the scent of mesquite smoke on the wind. They rode in silence. Dustin on his horse, the women in the old wagon he had left hitched outside. The creak of the wheels, the jingle of tack, the distant cry of coyotes. The youngest, her name he later learned was Isabella, huddled against her sisters Maria and Rosa. They didn't ask where he was taking them. Maybe they didn't care. Anywhere was better than the cage they'd been in. Dustin led them to his ranch, a low cabin pressed against the wide sweep of the land, cottonwoods shivering under the moon. The place smelled of hay and wood smoke, of lonesome years. He pushed open the door and lit the lamp. Inside, rough-hewn table, stone fireplace cold, his wife's shawl still hanging on the peg where she had left it before sickness stole her breath. He set down bread and water. "Eat." They did, carefully, like foxes unsure if the trap was sprung. He didn't press them with questions. Just sat in the corner chair, watching firelight crawl over their hollow faces. It was only in the silence, Maria looking at the framed daguerreotype of his wife on the shelf, Rosa brushing Isabella's hair with trembling fingers, that something inside Dustin shifted. They weren't one. They were human. And they were his responsibility now. The next days unfolded like slow dawn. Dustin gave them space. He worked his land, chopping wood, mending fences, while the sisters began to breathe again. Isabella fed chickens and hummed soft tunes under her breath. Maria scrubbed floors until they shone, as if washing away memory. Rosa stood often on the porch, staring at the horizon, her face unreadable, but she stayed. There was little talk. Only gestures. Dustin leaving boots by the door so as not to track mud on Rosa's clean floor. Maria setting an extra plate for him at supper. Isabella sewing up the tear in his work shirt without a word. One evening, as dusk bled crimson over the prairie, Dustin found Rosa stacking wood. Her hands were raw, splintered. He reached for the bundle, taking it from her grip. Their eyes caught, his steady, her storm-scarred. He said quietly, "Don't break yourself. Let me." For a long beat, she held his gaze. Then she let go. That was the first trust. Backstory crept out like smoke through cracks. A rider came one morning, an old vaquero with sorrow in his eyes. He knew the girls. Their family land south of the border had been burned by bandits who dealt women like coin. They had been passed from one hand to another until that poker night. And the man Dustin had beaten? He wasn't done. He'd come back for them. Dustin listened, jaw clenched, knuckles white on his hat brim. The vaquero warned him. Men were coming. Dangerous men with rifles and no mercy. That night, Dustin sharpened his axe by the fire while Maria mended clothing, Rosa boiled beans, and Isabella sang soft to herself. The house felt warm, alive, but beneath it ran a river of fear. Rosa finally spoke, voice low. "He won't stop." Dustin looked up, the whetstone pausing. "Then neither will I." The storm broke at dawn. Dust rose on the horizon. 5 riders, rifles glinting, cruelty in every swagger. The ranch dogs barked ragged. Isabella shrieked, clutching Maria's arm. Rosa grabbed Dustin's shotgun from the wall, her hands trembling but steady enough. Dustin stepped onto the porch. The wind smelled of rain though no clouds showed. His boots sank in the dust. He stood like a rock, waiting. The riders drew up, spitting curses. The leader was the rancher from the saloon, face red with fury. "Them girls are mine, Hartman. Hand 'em over." Dustin's voice carried like iron. "No." The man sneered. "Then die with them." Rifles lifted. The world held its breath. And then it snapped, gunfire cracking like lightning, smoke and dirt erupting. Dustin fired first, clean and fast, the shotgun booming. One rider fell from his saddle. Another's hat flew as a bullet sang past. Maria dragged Isabella inside, shoving her under the table. Rosa, pale but fierce, reloaded Dustin's spare revolver with shaking hands, passing it to him like she'd done it her whole life. The fight stormed around them, hooves pounding, glass shattering, bullets carving splinters from the doorframe. Dustin stood solid, firing steady, each shot placed with grim purpose. Then the rancher himself rushed, pistol drawn, screaming. Dustin stepped forward, meeting him head-on. They clashed in the dust, fists and fury. The man clawed for his knife, steel flashing in the sun. For a moment, Dustin faltered. The blade caught his sleeve, cutting flesh. Pain seared. The world spun. But then Rosa. She came from behind, face hard, and smashed the wood of a stove poker across the rancher's skull. He staggered. Dustin finished it with one clean blow, the man crumpling in the dirt, blood darkening the earth. The others fled, yelping like whipped curs. Silence returned, heavy and final. After, the house stood quiet except for shallow breaths. Dustin leaned against the porch post, blood on his arm, dust on his face. The 3 sisters stood near, Isabella clutching Maria, Rosa still holding the bent stove poker like proof she could fight back. Their eyes met, his and Rosa's, neither speaking. Just the weight of survival between them. A bond not of words, but of shared battle. Inside, the fire burned low. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying away smoke and fear. Dustin looked at them, all 3, and for the first time in years felt something crack open in his chest. Not pity. Not ownership. Family. His voice was rough but steady. "You'll never be gambled again. Not while I'm breathing." Maria's eyes filled. Isabella nodded fiercely. Rosa, after a long beat, let the poker fall and whispered, "Then we'll stay." And so the story ended not with silence but with warmth. 3 sisters who had been tossed like cards into a cruel game, and a widower who had lost everything but learned to fight for someone again. A house once empty now alive with voices, laughter hesitant but growing. And the land itself seemed to breathe easier, as if even the wide prairie knew the worth of such love. And maybe that's the truth of the Wild West. Sometimes family isn't found by blood, but by chance and by the courage to protect what others would throw away. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even deeper than this one. You'll carry it with you long after the fire dies down. Go on. I'll meet you there.